Good evening. Glad that you could join us. We had one more, but we lost her. Hopefully she'll join us back in a few minutes. So this evening I am going to sort of introduce you to the course and give you a quick look around on Blackboard and on OLI, and then cover some of the material for OLI for the first week so that you can do the quizzes. Well, only one quiz covers Module 1. Quiz 2 does. But let's real quick look at Blackboard first to look at a couple things. Alright, and so you should be looking at my screen right now. If by chance you're not, then someone chime in and let me know. You can either use the chat box at the bottom left, or you can click the talk if you have a microphone on your computer. Especially when you're asking questions and we're interacting, it's usually a little easier to use your microphone, but I found last semester that a lot of students were shy, and so there was just a couple who like to use their microphone. But that's whatever you prefer. It's fine with me. Okay, so here's our class, intro stats. Oh, let me find which one is us. That's not at the top. I need to rearrange my Blackboard. That's our class. Okay, let me change it so it looks like students. I think this is it. So it looks like students. So this is the home page. I don't use this home page too much. Most of what you'll find, you got your course information page, which is the second button. There on the left. Faculty info. I don't even know if let's see that. Nope, that's empty. I need to fix that, but I will. All right. You have your syllabus, your how the course works document, and then the instructions for OLI registration. It says register by Thursday at the latest. That's actually supposed to say Friday. So I'll fix that. All right. And assignments is really where you'll find most of what you need to know. Here's the week 1 assignment folder. Each week you'll see a new assignment folder. It will actually be above. So the week 2, next week, Sunday night at midnight, week 2 assignments will go live, and it will be right above the week 1 assignments because I want you to focus on the newest thing. So you go into the assignments. I have separate documents for the descriptions, the more detailed descriptions, and then another document for a quick checklist. So I find that sometimes students don't use the checklist. I'm not sure why, but I think it should be helpful because you can do exactly what it says. So like the week 1 assignment checklist. So by tomorrow night, you should have sent me an introductory email. You should have signed up for OLI, signed up for Piazza, and made your first discussion posting. By Monday night, as it shows, complete the Blackboard survey, complete quiz 1, quiz 2, OLI Module 1 checkpoints, which we'll look at, and respond to 2 classmates' discussion postings, and then by Wednesday, answer any classmate responses. So that document's always there, but the details are in the descriptions. So you should always look at that, and you can go through and see all the things that I'm expecting. Make sure you read the assignments carefully. For a number of students, for assignment 1, they made it in a list, but as it says, it's supposed to be in paragraph form. So I sent them an email back and said, reread the assignment. All right. Quiz 1. I had a student who had an issue with quiz 1. I need to take a look at that, which I will if you are attending or listening to the video or watching the video. Quiz 2 is actually on the material. You would click the quiz and it'll open up as a Word or save as a Word document. So here's the quiz. So you just go through and answer the questions. But I expect what you'll do is you'll enter into the space and type your answers. type your answers in, and then save the document. You can also, if you prefer, as I noted, if you prefer writing answers, you can print this out and make space first, print it out, and then write your answers, and then scan it and send it to me as an email. But please, if you do that, not as an email, sorry, submit it to Blackboard. If you do that, I really prefer that you do that as a PDF document. Most scanners will give you that as an option. But if you submit it if you complete it in Word, you can submit it either as a Word or a PDF. I do have a little bit of a preference for PDF because I'm actually going to try and grade them by writing on it, and I can do that on a PDF much more easily than I can on a Word document. All right, and so just as an added bonus for being here today or watching this online, so if we look at this first question, we have a description of a study, and if you go through the study, it gives students directions to a task in 2 different fonts. An upright, easy-to-read font, and italic font that's harder to read, smaller type. And they asked the students how long they thought the task would take. So they didn't actually do the task, they just estimated how long they thought it would take. And without doing it, just based on how the instructions, just the font of the instructions, with the easy-to-read font, they thought it would take less time, and with the hard-to-read font, they thought it would take more time. So, as it says, researchers concluded that such a large difference was not likely to have occurred by chance. There was evidence that people think a task will be harder when instructions are difficult to read. All right. So then the first question is this an experiment or an observational study? And the answer to this question is that this particular one would be an experiment. The way you decide between experiment and observational study is you think about, were the researchers creating different conditions for the individuals in the study to see, did the researchers create any change in conditions between the individuals to see whether those different conditions would cause different results. And in this case they were. And what they changed between the 2 different groups was the font. Okay, so this would be an experiment because the researchers gave the 2 different groups different fonts to see whether that would have an impact on the time estimate for the task. And then there's your research question also. Does changing the font change how long students will think, how difficult students think a task will take, or more specifically, how long they think it will take, how difficult they think it will be, sorry, or how long they will think it will take. All right. All right, and then you go from there. Okay, so there's quizzes. Once you save it, so let's say that I had saved this. Let's see here. Where did it save? Let me save it as something like to my desktop. So the way I would save it, for me, I would go up and I'll do it on my desktop. I would do, so it's already online Stats Quiz 2. Actually, I'll just change it to Stats Quiz 2. I just put my name, or last name, space, first name, space, Stats Quiz 2. Okay? So obviously you would use your name there, click Save, and then when you wanted to submit it, I'll close it. If you want to submit it, you click the name of the assignment, Quiz 2 at the top, and you go down. For your submission, you click Browse My Computer, and I would go to my desktop, and I would go down and find my file. There it is, and I would attach it, and I would click Submit. I'm not going to do that right now because I'm not actually going to submit a quiz. I'm going to cancel. All right, so that's how you work with the quizzes. There's your stats survey, and there's a link to the discussion board. All right, so and you'll see something like this each week. As I noted in the assignments and in the announcement, there are more assignments this week and most weeks, and that's basically to I will say it right out. It's to weed out people who are not going to put in the effort that's necessary for this class. If the first week seems overwhelming, then you should probably look into other options for taking statistics other than the online course. But most of the assignments are fairly simple. Probably the ones that will take the most time are Quiz 2 and then the OLI checkpoints. All right. So there's the assignments on the left side. Then there's OLI. Let's click that and bring that up. It's going to. Oh, it should open in a new window. I'll fix that also. Let me, in fact, do that. Let's see if I can do this. It's still. All right. So slightly better. No, it still wants it. That's okay. It still thinks it's inside Blackboard, but I'll fix that so it actually pops up in a new tab or window. So that's going to come up in just a second. Mine's going to look a little different than yours because this is on the instructor. But you've got your online stats, 2020 online SCA 2023 summer 2014. And I'm going to click enter course because that's going to take me into sort of the text of the course. So you've got this. After the first time you go in, you'll have the option to sign to go back to where you were before. Right. The first part at the top there is just some introductory things. But then you get in Module 1 into sort of the heart of it. So if we go to the first page of Module 1, click into it. This will give you the contents of Module 1. You see the pages there. You can click. You can navigate straight to any page. The other way you can navigate through this is by clicking one of these topics, and then it'll give you the page choices at the bottom. There's a right arrow here because there's also the wrap-up page. To navigate to other modules, you click the drop-down arrow at the upper left, and it gives you all the different modules we'll cover this semester, but we're on Module 1 right now. And so I'll probably just go into the first page, and I'll leave that up because what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of this tonight. All right, so let's go back here. Let's look at Piazza real quick. I'll open this in the new tab also. Oh, the link doesn't work from there. Okay. Maybe it is working. It's just taking its sweet time because it won't let me click. Oh, there we go. All right. Well, I can always do Piazza.com. I'll fix the link there as well. So that works. Okay. So if you have a question for me, here you would just click New Post there at the upper left, or if you had a comment or anything like that. And you'll put in a summary and then your details. And you can do, if you see at the type, you have the choices of the post type being a question, a note, or a poll or a class response, which I've never used one of those. But questions or notes are what most of your things are going to be. Now you may wonder why I use Piazza, and the reason why is because it kind of combines everything that a general discussion would do in Blackboard plus the announcements in Blackboard into one place. That way, if you have a question for me, everybody can see it. It's easier to look through, in my opinion, than a discussion board on Blackboard. Also, this gives you the ability to ask questions to me privately. It also gives you the ability to post anonymously, both to your classmates or to me. So mine doesn't have the choice to send anonymously, so I guess as the instructor, I wouldn't post anonymously. All right, so you can find things there. If you go to the course page, anything that I posted as an announcement would be there, and you see there's the announcement there on the right. I'll probably add some of this stuff on the left, the description and general information. But that's Piazza. It's just an opportunity for people to ask questions. The nice thing about asking questions on Piazza is that any student can answer the question in addition to me. So like this, here's a question where someone said, where is the survey located on Blackboard? I'm not sure where to look. and then I answered. But a student could have answered as well. There's a separate box if you were logged in that says the student's answer. And you can put it in there, put an answer in there, and more than one student can edit the answer. So if one student puts in an answer and another student's like, well, I'm not sure they actually could use more clarification, they can add to it, or if it's just wrong, it's like a wiki type thing where multiple people can edit. And then if there's a follow-up discussion, if you're not just answering it, but you have a related question or a comment, you would do follow-up discussion at the bottom. All right, so that's Piazza. All right, let's go down. Resources is very important. Let's look at resources. So I made a bunch of videos. The vast majority of them are for the calculator. If you click on it, it does open in a new tab. So I've got, it's actually reverse order, so it's probably best to click on videos, and then date added oldest to newest is what you probably want, because that'll, so you see TI 83, 84 using lists, that'll be in module 2, histograms, summary statistics, and so on. Creating symbols, which you'll have to do later, and then more things. And then the last two, module 8, part 1 and 2, those were I did online video because I was unable to do a webinar for those for my last class. All right, but those should help you with using the calculator in particular. All right, so that's the YouTube channel. In-class notes, as it says, they're from my on-site class. And so that's just the notes that refer to each module. Now, these are written not with you as an audience, but they can be helpful. But what you'll find is there's some things that are related to an activity that we were doing in class that day where you may not exactly follow it. But the details, as far as the description of what we're doing, the statistical information is in those notes. So you definitely should read through those notes. And I generally assume when I write quizzes that not only have you gone through the OLI, but you've also gone through the in-class notes. Test reviews is just that, but in addition to the reviews, I'm also going to post the copies of the tests after the deadline is passed, along with grading keys. So after you take test 1, you have Monday to Monday to take it. So on Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll post the answer key for test 1. So that you can have a look at it. You can use it for review when it comes time for the final exam. All right, so go back to the resources. What are the other resources that I have for you? Smart Thinking, which is a tutoring service that you can use that is paid for by your TCC tuition. There's built in. So if you want, they do statistics tutoring. So there's that as an option. It's live, back and forth. It's not like you ask a question and wait for someone to come online and respond. There's some printed calculator tutorials, an online equation editor to allow you to create symbols that you can insert into the quizzes if you're doing them on Word or on something other than Word. Word has a very easy to use equation editor. A link to the Learning Commons staff page, Blackboard Help, and then some of the activities on OLI are easier to do on Microsoft Excel than they are to do on the calculator. So that's what these data analysis tool packs are. They allow you to create an add-in for Excel that will allow you to do some more detailed statistical analysis using Excel. I realize now, looking at that I don't have one for Excel 2013, the very newest version of Excel, and I'll see if they've updated it for that and add that. All right, so that's the resources. What else is there? My grades is self-explanatory. Discussion board just links is a separate link to the weekly discussion board. And I thought so all of these other discussion boards, it says not available, so you'll see these later. All right, but there's the week 1 discussion. So it looks like we've already got 22 people who've posted. That's great. There's 41 people registered, so that means 19 more people need to post by tomorrow night. All right. And then tools is just some Blackboard tools. Blackboard help is just what it says. It's another link besides the one in the resources. Okay. And by the way, as I'm doing these webinars, you can always ask questions. You don't have to. You can jump in anytime you want to. You can either type in the chat box and hit enter, and I'll hear a notification that you've put in the chat. Or you can press the hand raise button if you would prefer to use your microphone. And it'll put up a little hand next to your name, and I'll hear a little tone for that. So anytime I hear one of those tones, once I finish saying what I'm saying, I'll come back to this screen, and I'll be able to see either what someone has typed in the chat box, or that someone has their hand raised, and I can call on them. So please don't wait. If you've got a question, please just jump in and chime in during the webinars. So I'll pause for a moment here and ask if either of you guys have any questions about sort of the layout of the course. That was a weird noise. I'm not sure what that was. So at the moment, I'll guess no, since nobody's jumping in, and that's fine. But if I get to some point and you have a question, please jump in and don't wait. Don't sort of let the question fester. It's better to ask it when you have it. So, and I see when you're typing in your chat box or when you clicked into it, I see a little icon next to your name. So for example, I can see that Michael has a question, or maybe you go by Jeremy since you put your middle name. I'm not sure. I wonder if you're trying to do something, Michael, and it's not working because you clicked it into your chat box, and then nothing's happening after you do that. That's
Can you hear me?
I can hear your microphone. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just typing. I did not have a question so far, and I guess now you can't see my chat. But yes, I do go by Jeremy.
Okay. All right. Yeah. When you hit, was that noise when you tried to hit enter or something? I just heard like a bonk bonk sort of noise.
Oh, okay, that's what I was doing. I was hitting enter, and I mean it shows up in my feed, but I guess it doesn't show up in yours.
That's weird. Yeah, I'm not sure why that would happen. Oh, you know what? Let me see. Click down here. Oh, now I can see it in the lower left. That's because you typed it just to me and not to the room.
Oh, okay.
So if you see at the lower left of my screen, it says room, and then I think moderator, and then it has your name at the bottom right.
There we go. I gotcha.
So room. It should then go to the main screen. You with me?
Okay.
There you go. All right, so that works. So it's a different tone. Now I know, though, if I hear that other tone, it's someone who's sending me like a PM. All right. And Lucius, are you with us? I see your name on the screen. I don't know if you're listening to us or you just logged into the webinar and maybe you're doing something else.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Oh, you are here. Good, good. Okay. And hey, look at this. Not shy people using their microphones. I like it. I like actually being able to talk to my students. So Lucius, you're good so far?
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. Then let's go on. Let's
actually, I do have a question. So Piazza is just essentially a backup to Blackboard discussion?
No, I don't have an open discussion forum in Blackboard. In other words, a place that's just sort of for general questions and answers and talk about the course. That's Piazza.
Gotcha. I didn't know if I was looking to do assignments in there or what we're supposed to be doing with that.
No, Piazza, I mean, honestly, I will redirect you to Piazza if you ask me a question that I think is of interest to the whole class. And then if you want to post anonymously, that's fine. But if you are posting, if it's something that's directly related to you, like if you're like, oh, did you get my quiz or something like that, you can send me an email about that or post a private message to Piazza. It doesn't really matter. Anytime someone posts something to Piazza, I get an email. So Piazza is just as easy for me as email. And in fact, on my phone, it's a little easier because I get notifications for Piazza on my phone. I do not purposefully, because of the volume, get notifications for email on my phone. I actually have to open my email. So, but I don't care either way. But for anything that you think might be of interest to the class, that other people might be curious about, definitely post that to Piazza. And if you send it to me by email, I'll probably say, hey, why don't you post this to Piazza, and I'll be happy to answer it.
Okay, it just sounds like a good site to, if I pose a question about a specific assignment or something like that, sounds like the class would probably be able to help me out that way or something like that.
Exactly right. Yep, exactly
okay.
right.
Okay.
All right. Go ahead.
No, that was it.
Okay. Fantastic. All right, then let's go ahead and go on to the Module 1 material and OLI. The one thing I'll ask you guys is and I see you just did it, Jeremy, is once you're done talking, it's been a good idea to turn off your microphone just so we don't hear any background noise. So just go ahead, Lucius.
How do you turn it off?
Just click the talk button at the top there.
Okay. Okay,
You see that button?
The volume.
No. There's a button just above the participants that says talk on the left and video on the right.
Okay, so just click that.
Yeah, do you see the talk button?
Yes.
Okay. There you go. You got it. All right. And like I said, just click if you got a question, it's probably better if you're going to use your microphone to click the hand raise button so I hear the noise rather than to just cut in. Okay. All right. So let's go into Piazza. Not Piazza, sorry. I'll close that for the moment. This is OLI. Okay. And let's talk about the different types of statistical studies, and we'll go through the material just to see what Module 1 is all about. And so, in general, that's going to be what I do on Thursdays, is go over the new material. And the reason I wait so late in the week to do it is just to give people a chance to actually look through it themselves. I find now this week, because we started on Wednesday, I know you probably haven't had too much of a chance to look at the material just yet. You might have looked at it somewhat. But generally speaking, if students have already looked at it before they hear me talk about it, I find that it's more useful if they've already gone through it themselves first. So that I do that on Thursday, and then on Monday evenings from 8:30 to 9:30, that's just for questions, especially since most assignments are due on Monday, like quizzes and things. If people have questions about things, they can ask them on the Monday evening webinar. But of course, you can also post them to Piazza. You don't have to wait for Monday. And I post the videos of the webinars afterwards. Usually I get an email within 5 or 10 minutes with the link to it. Every now and then it takes longer, and so I try to, as soon as I get the email, I post it, unless it comes so late in the evening that I've already gone to bed. All right, so let's look at the different types of studies, because that's what the first topic in Module 1 is you see there, types of statistical studies, topic 1.1. All right. Let me make this a little bit bigger. All right. So most broadly, there is research questions about populations. Okay, and any statistical study is going to be interested in a population or in multiple populations. So let's look at this example real quick. It says, suppose our research question is, what is the average amount of money spent on textbooks per semester by full-time students at Seattle Central? That's a community college outside of Seattle. We cannot interview every full-time student at Seattle Central because it would take too much time and cost too much money. We therefore carefully select a sample of full-time students at Seattle Central to represent the population of all full-time students at the college. Then we collect data from the sample to estimate the average amount spent on textbooks. All right, so the example of research illustrates how the research question guides the investigation. So you always start with a research question. All right, so a well-stated research question, as it says, contains information about the population, the information we're going to collect from each individual, which we call the variable. The variable is what we plan to measure. In this case, the amount of money spent on textbooks per semester for each student. We'll probably ask them for the current semester. And then a numerical characteristic about the population related to this variable, in this case, the average amount of money spent on textbooks per semester. So here are some common types of research questions about a population. One is to make an estimate. That was what that first one was, and here's another example of making it, two more examples. Usually we ask them about, as it says, an average or a proportion. Right, so the first one is, what's the average number of hours that community college students work each week? So the population there is community college students. What we would ask each student, the variable would be how many hours they work per week. And then for the population, we'd be looking at the average number of hours. Okay. What proportion of all U.S. college students are enrolled at a community college? The population is all U.S. college students. The variable is, for each college student, is whether they're enrolled at a community college. So each student is going to say yes or no to that question. And then the proportion is what fraction of them, we usually give it as either a decimal or a percent, are enrolled at a community college. Okay. And then we can also test a claim about a proportion. So in the first one we said, what is the average? So that's estimating. But now we're curious about whether the average course load for a community college student is greater than 12 units. So now instead of just wondering about what it is, we're wondering whether it's greater than 12. The reason why we might ask that question is because 12 credits is what we define as a full-time student. So we might be curious, on average, do community college students carry more than a full-time load or not? And then do the majority of community college students qualify for federal student loans? When we talk about a majority, that's again a proportion. It just means, is the proportion of students who qualify for student loans more than half? Majority means more than half, more than 50%. We might compare two populations. So in community colleges, do female students have a higher GPA than male students? So now our populations are female community college students and male community college students. And the variable is each student's GPA. And what we would calculate is the average for the females and the average for the males and compare them. Are college athletes more likely than non-athletes to receive academic advising? So then our populations are college athletes and college students who are not athletes. That's about a proportion. Yes or no, do they receive academic advising, and then the proportion who do. And then investigate a relationship between two variables in the population. Is there a relationship between the number of hours high school students spend each week on Facebook and their GPA? Is academic counseling associated with quicker completion of a college degree? All right, so those are different things. I apologize. I don't know why my computer has very small print on the learn by doings, but most of the time I'll probably just go past those and leave those to you to do. On all the learn by doings and did I get this, I might as well talk about those now because we didn't talk about those before. Learn by doing has hints for what type of answers you might want, and then whereas the did I get this doesn't. But neither of these are graded. They don't count towards your grade on OLI or in the course. But what they do is give you feedback. So I know it's very, very small print, and I apologize. The first one here, and then did I get this? It says, which research question is poorly stated because it doesn't specify a population. And then you would go through that, and it says, what's the average commute time for faculty working at a community college in California? So I can see the population there is those faculty. What proportion of college students take online classes? Well, that's college students. And what is your commute time when you drive to school? Well, that doesn't specify a population. It's just talking about one. That's a question you'd ask to one person. But who knows what population that's considered in the one person part of? So that second one, it would be the correct choice. But if I chose the first one, the middle one, it's going to give me an X, and it's going to say the research question is well stated. The population is college students. So you're going to get feedback. And even if you click the right one, it says, good job, this question is poorly stated. Here's an improved version. What is the average commute time for students attending Contra Costa College? So it's actually, especially on these multiple choice ones, it's a good idea to go through all the different answers just to see what the feedback is if you want to. These are good questions to practice. That's all these are, is practice questions, but you definitely want to use it. And then instead of questions about a population, we might have a research question about cause and effect. This is common in disciplines, as it says, that use experiments such as medicine or psychology. These types of questions ask how one variable responds as another variable is manipulated. So we've got two variables in an experiment, at least. These types of questions involve two variables. Here are some examples. Does cell phone usage increase the risk of developing a brain tumor? Does drinking red wine lower the risk of a heart attack? Does playing violent video games increase aggressive behavior? Does sex education lower the incidence of teen pregnancy? To provide convincing evidence of a cause and effect relationship, the researcher designs an experiment, and we'll discuss experiments in the future. But something that's important here with the idea of experiment is, as I mentioned before when we looked at the quiz example, an experiment involves manipulating one variable, assigning basically what we would call the explanatory variable to see what the results are. For some of these questions that are cause and effect type questions, that's actually not really possible. So sometimes it's really difficult to answer a cause and effect question. So, for example, look at the first one. Does cell phone usage increase the risk of developing a brain tumor? It would be hard for us to create an experiment here because that would involve having some people use cell phones and having other people not. Well, over a long period, because certainly I don't think using one for a week or not using it for a week is going to have any impact. They're looking at long-term behavior, and that's really hard to actually manipulate that variable, to actually cause people to use or not use their cell phone. Similarly with the second one, people either drink red wine or they don't, and it would be hard to assign some people to drink it and other people to not drink it. The third one might be a little bit easier. This one doesn't necessarily require a long-term study. You could do a short-term study where you had kids, perhaps, because you might be most interested in the kids. But maybe anybody. You would have different groups play violent and non-violent video games, and maybe a third group that did neither of those. I don't know, you could have them listen to music or something. And then you would, after that, maybe have them play as a group if they were children, and see if the children who played the violent video games were more likely to exhibit aggressive behavior. So that one you might be able to do an experiment. Sex education, does that lower the incidence of teen pregnancy? Again, usually this is decided by a school district, but you could do a small experiment in a school district to see if sex education actually helps. So you can't, just because you can formulate a cause and effect question doesn't mean you can easily answer it, that you can easily design an experiment which would answer it. All right, so it looked like and this, let's go back up for a second. It looked like these questions where we investigated a relationship, they sound a little bit like cause and effect questions. Like, is there a relationship between the number of hours high school students spend each week on Facebook and their GPA? Well, it would be hard to do cause and effect. So we wouldn't know for sure whether it was the Facebook that was causing the change in GPA, or whether perhaps students, maybe it's just that students are more social. The more social students tend to have lower GPAs. Or maybe people who spend more time on Facebook have higher GPAs. But unless, again, we dictated whether students spent time on Facebook or not, and found some way to limit that, it would be hard to do that as a cause and effect. So we look at the relationship. And is academic counseling associated with quicker completion of a college degree? Again, we would be looking at groups. Now, you could certainly assign groups to academic counseling or not. You could require some students to do it and not require other students to do it, and see what effect that has. So you might even be able to do that second one as a cause and effect. But if you're going to just do it, ask if there's an association, then you can just do a survey and ask people whether they got it, or see who got it, academic counseling, and who didn't, and see whether there was a difference. Okay? You wouldn't have to design an experiment. And if you don't have to design an experiment, usually the study is much easier. You can gather, sometimes you can gather data from existing resources. So in this case, in fact, they have done association studies, relationship studies for all of these. For cell phone usage, there is no association with developing a brain tumor. In countries where they consume more red wine, people do tend to have fewer heart attacks. But all that means, both of those things, well, the first one, you can mostly assume that means cell phone use probably doesn't increase it. But the fact that red wine, people in countries where people drink more red wine, they have lower heart attack risks, doesn't mean that red wine lowers the risk. All it means is that people who drink red wine have fewer heart attacks. It doesn't mean that that's the reason why. It could be perhaps that in countries where people, I'll get to you in just a second, in countries where people drink more red wine, they have other habits. Maybe they eat differently. So you can't, unless you do an actual experiment, you can't make a cause and effect conclusion. All right, Jeremy, what's your question?
Silly question. Are they only drinking red wine, or are they drinking other things too?
This is overall red wine consumption, so certainly they drink other things as well, but they're just looking at how much red wine they consume.
I've always wondered.
Ignoring what else they might consume.
I've always wondered about that study. When they say that, I just assume, like, because people have specific drinks that they do stick to, you know, and I was just wondering if it was just...
Yeah. Sure. Well, the first thing, and when they talked about that study, the first thing they found was that people who drink, that countries where people drink red wine have lower heart attack rates. And so then they went further and they looked at individuals. They did studies of people over long term and found that people who drink red wine tend to have lower heart attack risks. So they actually now are pretty sure that because of all of the different studies, if you do enough studies over time, you can start to conclude that there's cause and effect. I mean, that's what they did with cigarette smoking and lung cancer.
Right.
They knew for a long time that people who smoked had higher rates of lung cancer, but they only knew that through observational studies. They didn't do experiments. Go ahead.
I wonder what it is, because I was also told that red wine has a higher alcohol percentage than white wine.
Yeah, but the difference is not dramatic. I think it has to do with the substances, and I don't know. Maybe red grape juice would work as well. There is some research that shows that all alcohol has beneficial effects at low consumption levels. They say 1 to 2 drinks per day on average for men, and 1 drink a day on average for women. Tends to have some beneficial effects in terms of heart disease and heart attacks. And one of the reasons they think that may be true is because alcohol is a blood thinner, and thinner blood flows more easily through the veins. But they're not sure of all the mechanisms. But I think red wine is considered to have the best impacts, and that may be something to do with some of the antioxidants in grapes, in addition to the effect of the alcohol itself.
Gotcha.
So it's interesting that a lot of things that are considered to be vices actually do have some beneficial effects, whether it's the protection against heart attacks of moderate alcohol consumption, whether it's so there's now more and more benefits that they're finding from caffeine, from some caffeine consumption. Of course, we know that there is a push for medical marijuana or THC for people who have cancer and some other diseases. Haven't heard of any beneficial effects of cigarette smoking, but we do have definitely some other things that have long considered to be vices do seem to have some beneficial health effects, which is kind of interesting, I think. All right, so we should probably move forward, or else we'll never get through what we need to get through. I think I didn't go far enough to the right to get my arrow to the right. There we go. You can also press the arrow next to the page number, and that'll advance you one page. All right. So types of statistical studies. There's two main types. There's some subtypes and some sort of analogous types, but for your purposes, we're either going to consider whether a study is an observational study or an experiment. So an observational study is just what it sounds like. You just observe. You gather data without actually trying to impact the results. Now, it could be even in a contrived setting, but you're not actually manipulating what you might call the explanatory variable. Whereas in an experiment, you actually do manipulate the explanatory variable. You impose, you change conditions for people, and the purpose is to see what that change means. Okay, so that's important because there are ones where researchers impose conditions, but it's merely to create a fixed environment. That's not what they're actually trying to measure. So that's the key difference, and it's an experiment which can answer a cause and effect question, and observational studies usually answer those questions about populations. So that's sort of the key. This is kind of an interesting study, and I actually have done it with my smaller classes. And it says, does listening to music improve learning? Students in a statistics class decided to investigate this question. Specific research: do the majority of college students listen to music while they study? And do the majority of college students believe that listening to music improves their learning? So are these questions about populations or about a cause and effect? I'll ask you that. I'll let you answer. Do you think these are questions about a population or questions about cause and effect? Cause and effect. Let's look at the question again. Do the majority of college students listen to music? Now, forget what what they were saying at the top. Look at underneath study 1 here, what's in italics. These are the research questions. Do the majority of college students listen to music while they study? Do the majority of students believe that listening to music improves their learning? So these are actually questions about the population of college students. There's no cause and effect. It doesn't say, does music improve their learning? It's, do they listen to it, and do they believe that it improves their learning? Now, as you see up the second sentence in the upper paragraph, so is a cause and effect question, but that's not in this specific study. Okay, so there are specific questions where, do you listen to music while you study, and do you think it improves your concentration and memory? So that's an observational study, and they're answering questions. But now look at this one. When we compare students who study with music to students who study in a quiet environment, which group gives higher ratings for understanding what they study? And in this case, the instructor divided the class into two groups: those who listen to music when they study, and those who do not listen to music when they study. The students keep a journal for a week. Each time they study, they record the following information: length of the study session and how well they understood what they studied. Right? But again, this is observational because the instructor did not have the students listen to music or not listen to music. The students decided themselves. So he's merely observing whether or not they listen to music, and then how long they studied and how well they feel that they understood the material. Okay, and then now this last one is, does listening to music improve students' ability to quickly identify information? And then the instructor uses word search puzzles. She divides the class into two groups. Students on one side of the room do a word puzzle for 3 minutes while listening to music on an iPod. Students on the other side of the room do a word puzzle for 3 minutes without music. And then the instructor calculates the average number of words found by each group. Now this is an experiment because the instructor had decided who was going to listen to music and who was not. So they actually manipulated the explanatory variable. And then they looked to see for those who were assigned to listen to music and those who were assigned to do it in silence, whether there was a difference in how many words they found. So there's the difference. And so experiment answers cause and effect. So this is a cause and effect. Did the music, because they assigned them it randomly, they can basically be sure that if there's a difference between the group, most likely the difference was caused by the music. All right. Let's see here. So go on to the next page. All right. So I'm going to look at the ones now, as it says, on relationship between two variables. When we look at this kind of study, and also when we talk about cause and effect, we talk about explanatory variable and response variable. Explanatory variable is the one we believe is the cause. Response variable is the one we believe is the effect. As it says, to establish cause and effect, we want to make sure the explanatory variable is the only thing that impacts the response variable. We therefore get rid of all other factors that might affect the response. Then we manipulate the explanatory variable. Our goal is to see if it really does affect the response. But the key thing here is that in an observational study, there are other things that might be different because the researcher didn't decide who has each value the explanatory variable. But an experiment, by doing it randomly, that should eliminate differences between the two groups. So they did a hormone replacement study. This was kind of interesting. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. You can read it on your own. They did a large-scale study where they looked at women after menopause who were on hormone replacement therapy and women who were not. They did a random assignment, and they were curious to see if the hormone replacement therapy would help. But it ended up that it was actually, for these groups of women, it was actually harmful, and they ended up stopping the experiment and taking the women off the hormone replacement therapy because of the increased risks. And that's what it said. After 5 years, the group taking hormones had a higher incidence of heart disease and breast cancer. And it said this is exactly the opposite result from the result found in the observational studies. Which is, so just because an observational study shows something, we would not want to assume cause and effect. All right. All right, so let's go on to the next page. This is kind of an interesting study too. I won't, again, you can read it. The neat thing about this study is they took people who frequently multitask, and that is like they are playing with their phone and studying at the same time or watching TV. People who do that constantly, and then they took people who don't. And then they basically asked them to multitask. And the people who are constantly multitasking are worse when required to multitask than people who don't. And they think that's because the people who don't multitask are better at focusing, so that when they have to multitask, they can do it better than the people who multitask on a regular basis. It's kind of funny. You should definitely read that synopsis. But as it says, in general, we should not make cause and effect statements from observational studies. But in reality, researchers do it all the time. It doesn't mean the researchers are drawing incorrect conclusions from observational studies. Instead, they have developed techniques that go a long way towards decreasing the impact of confounding variables. These techniques are beyond the scope of this course, but we briefly discuss a simplified example to illustrate the idea. And then you can read through this example. But it's the really important thing about how they finally decided that smoking causes cancer. And for a long time, because it was only observational studies, even though they knew that smokers had higher rates of cancer, tobacco companies, cigarette companies, claimed that it had not been proven that cigarette smoking causes cancer. And in a sense, they were right, because it was only observational studies. But we are now pretty well convinced that smoking does cause cancer. Right. And then when you get to the end of a module, or sorry, the topic, you'll be on the wrap-up page, and you'll scroll down, and there'll be some information, summaries, types of statistical studies, variable. So this is a good summary page, and then a checkpoint. Now it says there's a My Participation page, which includes the following activities, but which includes things on this page, as it says. So don't expect to see this number being 100%. Mine is only 7% because I think I did one problem. The My Response, if you look at this, it says this is not a bad thing. It sort of gives you some idea of where you stand. But as far as other questions you might have, I would generally post these to Piazza, not on here. This is just an idea, sort of this first part where you go through these things. Can I distinguish between questions about a population and questions about a cause and effect? And it just sort of tells you, okay, do I feel pretty confident with the material in this section? Can I determine if the study is an experiment or an observational study? Can I explain how the study design impacts the types of conclusions that can be drawn? All right. So let's see here. So you can look at that, but that's not a required part. And then the checkpoint, this is what's your OLI grade, the checkpoints. So there's going to be a checkpoint at the end of each topic. So you tap on that. You go down, it sort of describes it. You click Start Attempt, and then you answer the questions. And this is static. You get 2 shots at each one. So on a question like question 1, which only has 2 options, you should certainly get that one right if you have 2 chances to do it. But some of the other ones will have more choices. So but after you take it the first time, you can see what your wrong answers were, and then try to figure out the correct one. The checkpoints, though, I'm not so concerned about. I'm certainly willing to help you with those. The quizzes, I'll probably more try to point you in a direction, but the checkpoints I'll be happy to help you with. So just as a quick note, so question 1, it says the NHANES, you can read the acronym, large and ongoing series of studies that investigate questions about the health and nutrition of adults and children in the United States. The survey is unique because it combines interviews and physical examinations. And it says these studies are what kind of studies, and since it says interviews and physical examinations, it doesn't look like they're actually creating any conditions, changing any conditions, so these would be observational studies, the NHANES. Okay. And then you can continue on with the checkpoint from there. All right. And then additional questions, again, I would post questions to Piazza rather than posting them on in OLI. All right. So topic 1.2, let's just see where we are, 9:33. If we go a couple minutes over, that's okay. All right, sampling. This is how you get your data, and mainly we're worried about observational studies. We're concerned with observational studies. The big thing to take from this topic is if we're going to use a sample, so the sample is a subset of the population that we're using to represent the population. Well, if your sample is going to represent your population, you want to make sure that your sample is representative of your population. And what we mean by representative is that your sample looks like your population. It has, the demographics of the population, like ethnicity, gender, etc. Those things should be similar in the sample to the population. So here's a couple of ways of gathering data. Political scientists wants to know what percentage of college students consider themselves conservative. The population is college students. It would be too time-consuming and expensive to poll every college student. So the political science selects a sample of college students. Of course, the sample must be carefully selected to represent the political perspectives that are present in the population. So that's a sample, and you can look at the other one. A sampling plan describes how we will choose the sample. Sampling plan is biased if it systematically favors certain outcomes. So we don't want to leave out certain groups of people. And this gives an example of one that's biased where in a particular presidential election in 1996, they did a survey of 2 million people, which is huge, and they found that 60% supported the Republican candidate Alf Landon, who was beaten in a landslide. A 60% win would be a landslide, but it was actually a landslide in the other direction. But as this says, that magazine used a biased sampling plan. And all of these things, magazine subscriptions, registered car owners, telephone directories, those are not representative of the American public because that was during the Great Depression. And so people who were hit hardest by the Great Depression would probably not be subscribing to magazines, owning cars, or having telephones back in those days. So it turned out that they left out huge portions of the population. All right. So these are other ways to sample badly. It's pretty straightforward. Online polls, voluntary response samples, mail surveys, which are mall surveys, sorry, which are convenient samples. So here's how you eliminate. You do random sampling, which is where you you choose names. You choose people to be in your sample at random. The simplest way is simple random sampling, which is like picking names out of a hat. If you put every name in the population in a hat and you drew them, that would be simple random sampling. That's not always possible because you don't always have all the names from your population. Random samples eliminate bias, even bias that may be hidden or unknown. And then you should go through, this activity is kind of neat with the applet. You do have to download the Wolfram CDF player, which I have not had a chance to download. I've not put on here yet. But it's kind of a nifty one, and you'll see that, see how bias presents itself. And I did an example like that in class, and if you see something in the notes that looks a little odd, that was the example I did like that in class. So we'll go on to the next page. All right, so main points about sampling. We draw a conclusion about the population on the basis of sampling. Sample has to be representative. We don't want it to be biased. That is, we don't want it to systematically favor certain outcomes. And random selection is how we eliminate bias. So it says for random samples, size matters. It's a good idea to pick as big a sample as you can. But beyond a certain point, you sort of have diminishing returns. And the other interesting thing about sample size is how big your population doesn't matter. That means, so if we were interested in people's opinions and we looked at people in Tallahassee, if we chose 1,000 people in Tallahassee and then we asked the same question of 1,000 people in Florida and the same question of 1,000 people in the U.S., that all that matters is that sample size. 1,000 people in Tallahassee, 1,000 people in Florida, and 1,000 people in the USA all do an equally good job of representing their populations. So it doesn't matter the sample size. The other thing people think, so that the confusion they get is they think, well, 1,000 is a teeny tiny percentage of the whole USA, but it doesn't matter as long as it's a good cross section. Doesn't matter the size. All that matters is that you do it randomly. So, well, it doesn't matter the size, but it doesn't matter the percentage, is what I should say. So, 1,000 people, the raw number, not the percentage, is what matters. So bigger is still better, but percentage doesn't matter. Okay, take care. Get a good night's sleep, and you can watch the tail end of the video. I'll have it up later.
Actually, is there a schedule for the webinars posted at all?
Yeah, if you look at the, if you look, it's posted on the syllabus.
It is.
But it's going to be Thursdays from 8:30 to 9:45 and Mondays from 8:30 to 9:30.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
You bet. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, so that's really the key thing in sampling. All right, so now we'll go ahead. One last thing is a census, which is where you survey everyone in the population. But this is really hard and expensive, and even the census of the U.S. misses a chunk of the U.S. population. So unless you have a small population, a census is not usually practical, and even if you have a large population, you're still going to miss people. All right, so I'm not going to go to the summary page for topic 1.2. I'm going to go right on to topic 1.3, experiments. All right, so this tells us a little bit about experiments. So our goal in an experiment, as it says, is to get rid of confounding variables. In other words, to control for them things that would mess up our cause and effect determination. So as it says, confounding variables mix up our ability to determine if the explanatory variable truly causes a change in the response variable. Right? As it says, two strategies to control the effects of confounding variables are direct control and random assignment. So what are these things? Well, direct control means that you make sure the conditions for everybody in the experiment are as similar as possible. So in this particular example, they had people, they wanted to test different hand drying methods to see if they mattered for bacteria. So as it says in this, they had participants handle uncooked chicken for 45 seconds, then wash their hands with 1 squirt of soap for 60 seconds, then use one of 3 hand drying methods. And then they did a bacteria count. So you see there are 3 different ways they controlled things. One was everybody handled the chicken for the same amount of time, everybody used the same amount of soap, and everybody washed for the same length of time. So those are the ways they used control, right? Because all they really wanted to be different between the 2 groups was the method of hand drying. Okay. All right. So then random assignment means that you decide who is in which group randomly. Basically, you draw names out of a hat. So in the hand washing experiment, you had 3 groups depending on the methods of, hand drying experiment. You had 3 groups depending on the method of hand drying. And what you would do is you would take your sample and you would divide them into 3 groups randomly. And because that would minimize the differences between the groups, that's the most likely way to make the 3 groups similar in as many ways as possible. And then here, this is for types of surgery and recovery time. You might make sure that certainly if you're looking at recovery time and surgery, you want your 2 groups to be as similar as possible. You don't want one group to be older than the other. You don't want one group to be more female or male than the other. But the best way to do that is randomly assigning the groups, not trying to pick. Let's see here. And then this, if you go through this CDF, it'll show you that doing random assignment ends up with fairly similar groups. And that's the goal of random assignment. And that's one of the things you need to remember. I think I asked a question like this on the quiz or on a test or something. But basically the idea is to create similar treatment groups. So if they're similar, then any differences we see should be due to the difference in treatment. Okay? And as it says, in this way, random assignment controls the impact of confounding variables. All right, so how do we make random assignment? Basically, we rent names out of a hat, however you want to do it. It's or coin flips. There's not a specific rule that you have to do it a certain way. Let's see. And then we'll go to the last page. This is the last page of the module, other than the review page. So let's summarize what we know. The experiment helps us to determine whether there's a cause and effect relationship. We control the effect of confounding variables. using direct control and random assignment. Random assignment uses random chance to assign participants, and the goal is to create similar treatment groups. A few other things to note: a control group is a good thing. A control group is a group that does not get the treatment. So sometimes the groups are just different, like in the 2 different fonts and the quiz. Those are not, there's not a control group there because they're just, both groups are doing something. A control group is like if you have people eating Cheerios. There was an experiment where people ate Cheerios to see if it would lower their cholesterol. Well, you have to have a baseline group to compare them to. So you take 2 groups, one that eats Cheerios and one that doesn't, compare them, follow them for a few weeks, and compare them. So the group that doesn't eat Cheerios would be your control group. And then you can read some examples here. You can also include a placebo in addition to a control group. This often happens in medical experiments where they're testing medications. In that case, the control group would not receive the medicine, but the placebo group would receive what we call a fake medicine. Because of something called the placebo effect, where people, if they get some sort of pill, they may think they're getting a real pill and it may make a difference. So that's the placebo effect and why they do placebos in many studies. Another thing is that we want to blind the people in the experiment. That is that you give them as little information as possible. Certainly with a medical experiment, you wouldn't tell them whether they're receiving a placebo or treatment. And in fact, it's best that the people who interact with the subjects also don't know, so that they don't treat them differently. So like what you would do is you would just give pills labeled patient A, B, C to the people who interact with them, but you wouldn't tell them what pills are in which, or what type of pills are for each patient. They would just have a couple of pills. If it was to test a drug. So that's important, so that there's no effect from knowing what's going on. Let's see here. And then, so these are some other things. You have placebo groups, random assignment, double blind. So all of these things goes through it as an example of an experiment. So this is the last thing, and this is almost the key part. So hopefully lots of people get to this part. The biggest thing, there's always going to be differences. Anytime you look at 2 groups, there's going to be a difference. So, for example, if I was curious, if I was teaching an online stats class and an in-class stats class, and I gave them both, I looked at their average grades on test 1. Well, there's almost, the average test grade for the 2 classes is almost certainly going to be different. Just because there's random chance variation in who's in the classes and how they do on the test. What I'm interested in is that difference more than we would expect just by random chance? And so that's when we start to say, okay, the difference is real. So there's always 2 possibilities for a difference. That the difference was caused by chance variation, or the difference is there because there really is a difference. So when that difference, when we think it's real, we say the difference is significant. So I think as you look at studies, you need to think, okay, so if there's when we're looking at differences between the groups, the difference could be real or it just could be due to chance. And what we're always interested in is the difference large enough to rule out chance. Now, we don't rule it out 100%, but we say that chance is not a likely reason for the difference. All right, so that wraps it up. The last thing I want to say, good thing I'm wrapping it up since my battery is low. The last thing I want to say is that I showed you the checkpoints at the end of each topic. If you go to the wrap-up page, there's also a checkpoint there. So if you look at any particular, let me go back. If you look at topic 1.1, you'll see there's a wrap-up page. If I look at topic 1.2, there's a wrap-up page. If I look at topic 1.3, there's a wrap-up page. And then there's also a wrap-up page for the whole module. There's a checkpoint for each of those things. So there's a checkpoint for every topic, and then there's a checkpoint for the whole module. So for Module 1, there's 4 checkpoints that you need to do. If you do those 4 checkpoints, you'll be good. Make sure that you get 2 shots at each one. It takes the highest grade, so you should always do your second option. But after you do your first one, make sure that you're pretty darn sure of the correct answer before you do your second attempt. I think that about does it. So I'll just say, do you have any questions? You have one person who remained with us to the very bitter end. Okay. I'll take that as a no, and I will be back online at 8:30 on Monday night for any questions you might have over the week 1 material. I will send out a link tonight or tomorrow for that Monday webinar so that you'll have a little more advanced warning. I hope everyone is having an enjoyable week so far and has a good weekend depending on when you watch the video. Take care and have a nice night.